Record. All right, we're going to talk about linear equations, and then we'll talk about the inequalities with them, which is really close to the same thing. All right, so let's talk about solving equations first. Let's say I gave you something that looked like this. And I said solve for x. Tell me what you would do. Distribute, right? I want to clean up both sides if I can. And I should always try to do that if possible. I'm going to say clean it up. Okay? In other words, get it to where x is only written one time on each side. All right? So I heard distribute, and you're absolutely right. 2 times 2x is what? 4x. And 2 times negative 3. And then 3 times x. Plus 3. And it equals 5x plus 2. So clean it up. Remember, get those. You only want one x on each side to start with. Then we can combine those. So looking at the left side, what does that become? Combine your like terms. What's it mean to be like terms? Same variable, same exponent. So where are your like terms on the left? 4x and 3x. So when you combine those, what do you get? 7x. Now put your constants together. You got a negative 6 and you got a 3. So what's that give you? Negative 3. Now what do we do? You want to get your x's together on the same side. I know this is like algebra 1 stuff here, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. So I'm going to subtract 5x. Why'd you move 5x and not 7x? It's smaller. It's smaller. It's not wrong if you move the other, but generally if we move the smaller one, it makes life a little bit easier. So I have 2x minus 3 equals 2. Now what do we do? We can add 3. Now we get to the part where we can do backwards order of operations. So we SAD map until we get x by itself. Okay? So any addition or subtraction we take care of first, and you say we add 3, and that's exactly right. We add 3 to both sides. You get 2x equals 5, and now what? Divide by 2. See, am I struggling with equations? I don't want to go too fast if anybody struggles with those. How might you check to make sure that's the right answer? Plug it back in. If it equals itself, then yes, you get it's the correct answer. Well, then let's kick it up from algebra 1. Let's make it a slightly harder one and see what happens. What happens if my equation looks something like this? How might I solve that? What's the first problem you notice? There's what? There's fractions, right? Those are going to cause me some trouble. Do what? We need to get rid of the bottom parts. How could we do that? Did you say make them the same? That's exactly right. We need to look for an LCD. A least common denominator, right? Between all of the fractions here. what would the LCD be here of 8, 1, and 4? 8, right? Everybody agrees it's 8? Okay. So after we look for the LCD, we want to make all have the same denominator. Okay. What denominator, what would I need to multiply that? The first fraction is good, it's already 8. What would I need to multiply this one by? 8. And remember, if I do that, I got to do it to the top and the bottom. So I do times 8 and times 8. What's the second one become? What's it need, I mean? A 2. So I do it to the bottom and to the top. Once everybody's in the same denominator, you can just work with the numerators. And it makes life a whole lot easier. Now, do y'all remember doing this? Okay. Now I have 5x minus 2 equals 16 plus 2x. I'm going to put over here drop denominators. If you don't remember, tell me and I'll spend a little more time on it. Now is that something that you can solve? Absolutely. Now it's an easy solve, right? What should I do first? Minus the 2x. So now I have 3x minus 2 equals 16. And what now? Plus 2. And then what? That's right, just divide it. Anybody struggle with solving linear equations? That's a little bit tougher than the other, right? Because we got to force that denominator. Can everyone find a least common denominator? Everybody okay with that? Okay. Y'all ready to move on to inequalities then? Y'all are just, whew. All right, so linear inequalities are going to work the same way equations do, but there is one big difference. Does anybody know what that is? When you're solving them? Nobody? Solve just like equations. But what happens when you multiply or do y'all know what an inequality is? Is that why y'all looking at me crazy? You understand what that is? What is it? What's an inequality? Maybe that's why y'all are looking at me crazy. Less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Those are inequalities. Okay. When you multiply or divide by a negative, what happens? Anybody? Thank you. The sign flips. That is the only difference. We're going to write our answers in interval notation. I talked about interval notation in here, right? Didn't we talk about that? Okay. All right, so let's look at one. Let's go through and solve it, and then we'll write our answer in interval notation. Okay. All right, let's say I have something that looks like this. Then we'll do a fraction one, and we'll be just about done. What can I do? What do I do? Distribute. Clean it up, right? What does this become when you distribute 3 through? That's right. You tell me what to do. Move the 3x. So I got -1 less than or equal to 2x plus 6. Move the 6. You could do the +1, but if you did that, you'd have 0 on one side. It'd just make a little more work for you. What now? Divide by 2. Now, this one's a little bit harder to see because when you get the answer, you've got -7/2 is less than or equal to x, right? But if you think about less than to the left, greater than to the right, you really need to write it the other way so that the variable comes first. So remember that alligator mouth has to keep eating the same thing. It's got to stay with the x. So if I move it around that way, it's easier to see that that's greater than -7/2. How might I write that in interval notation? Y'all can do this. Let's think about it on a number line first. -7/2, is it open or closed dot? Closed. Does it go to the right or to the left? To the right. Now tell me interval notation, what does it look like? Bracket. And infinity. Smallest to biggest. Always smallest to biggest. Does that make sense? Yes. Let's do one with fractions and see what happens. Two more examples and I'll be done. This one and one more. X/3 plus 1/2 greater than X/4 plus 1/3. I need an LCD for 3, 2, 4, and 3. What might that be? 12. We all agree it's 12? What's the first one need? 4. What does the second one need? 6. How about the third one? 3 and 4. So anybody confused? Because if that might be the only new thing that you haven't seen yet is the LCD method of solving. Everybody okay on that? Drop them off and just look at the tops. 4x plus 6. And we can do this because our variables sit in the top. Should be an easy solve at this point. Which one should I move? 3. So that gives me x plus 6 is greater than 4. Subtract the 6. X is greater than -2. Should I flip the sign? No, I didn't multiply or divide by a negative. What's it look like in interval notation? It's the smallest x can be. -2 up to infinity. And I do the parenthesis because it's not included. Last one, very last one, I promise. What if I have a double inequality? In other words, what if I have something that looks like this? How do you solve an inequality that looks that way? I'm going to say solving a double. And my goal is still to get x by itself, but this time it's going to get by itself in the middle. Okay? So get x by itself in the middle. And whereas a normal inequality, if I do it to one side, I do it to both sides. Here, what you do to the middle, you have to also do to both sides. Also do to all. So in other words, looking at the middle, what's my first step to get x by itself? What do you do? Right? We all agree with that? That's going to get rid of this 3 on the bottom. But I have to come here and do it. And I have to come here and do it. And the same rule applies. If that had been -3, both of those signs would have flipped the other way. So I end up with -9 is less than 2x plus 5 less than or equal to 15. Do y'all remember doing these? You might not have done these. Now what? Subtract 5. From here, and from here. So I get -14 less than 2x less than or equal to 10. Yes. And divide by 2. -7. What's that look like in interval notation? Yes. -7, 5. Bracket, and parenthesis here. Easy peasy. Yay. Oh, let me just say this as you're solving and make sure you remember how to do this. How do you get rid of a square root? Second power. Square both sides, that's how you get rid of a square root, right? What does this mean? It's a third root. Okay, anytime you see a fractional exponent like that, it's telling you what the root is outside of this radical. Do y'all remember that? A little bit, vaguely. If not, that's what it means. So again, to get rid of this would be a power of 3, and it would cancel that out. Let me just make sure. I think that's it.